Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsor, Make Some Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials, and the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns, and a bunch of them you have even heard about on this very show. And they currently offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com, and right now listeners of this show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their very first order. So that is Mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tip to get a 5% discount on your first order. And I have with me comic creator and writer Dylan Goss from Stuffed Rock Studios. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I am very excited because you've been in my Facebook group for a while, and I see you posting all the time. I think you've been posting, for almost like 6-7 months, and we've never just connected. I never reached out to you, and then I just said, hey, let me see if you want to be on my show. Reached out, and then we sort of set something up, and I'm super excited to have you on. And one of the reasons why is that you're doing indie comics slightly different, where you are taking a more Patreon and a more webtoons approach to it with Stuffed Rock Studios and your comic, Mara. So before we get into Mara and even sort of why you're doing it this way, because it's very different, what is Stuffed Rock Studios for those who are hearing about it for the first time?
So, Stuffed Rock, I like the idea of just those two things don't go together. You don't have a plush that's also a rock, and that's just what my sense of humor is like. So this is our first comic, and I do have other comics I want to make under the same umbrella. And the reason I came up with a studio name is that I didn't want it to just be some guy who makes comics. I wanted to have a label, and I like that label.
And even going further into this, because it is very smart, because and the way I view it is that you've built almost an imprint and a publisher and created almost a structure to place your first comic in, and almost created a company, which is very different than what most people do in comics. And I actually think you did something, whether that was intentional or not, that's actually really good infrastructure for what you're doing. Because I'm right now going through infrastructure building and creation building, and I don't think I did it wrong, but I could have, if I'm to redo this, and I started 8 years ago, I would have built this very differently. And so I think that it's very important, and I think it's a very good lesson for people who say, hey, I want to do comics or webtoons, or I want to do an internet, comic-based project, that maybe you want to create your company first and then put all the things in there and then create. But even tabling that for a second, what was even the inspiration behind building this out? Because it is super interesting, because you're building out a company. You're not building out a comic anymore. A comic is part of your company, and you're light years ahead of where I think a lot of people are thinking.
Well, the thing is, I'm not the only person working on the comic, right? And I feel like it's not fair to the rest of the team if I'm saying, oh, this is a Dylan Goss comic. Well, it's not just a Dylan Goss comic. It's also a Rosie Wu comic. And the translators deserve to be credited too. But how many names are you going to cram on the cover? That's a little ridiculous, right? So in my mind, it's better to just have an umbrella company, and then you credit people individually, because I don't think I'm a more valuable member of the team. It might be my idea, and I might be the one writing it, but if it was just me, it'd be a novel. There'd be no comic.
And do you also think that from a branding position because, you know, when I go into a comic shop, I'm like, oh, that's a Marvel comic. That's a DC comic. From some degree, when I say, oh, that's a DC comic, everybody knows what I'm referring to. Or if I say, hey, this is an Atrocity Press book, you know, or this is a, you know, an Image book, for instance, or this is Top Cow's, you know, Top Cow position. Everybody gets it. Or I'll give a really good example that everyone understands. I say this is a Zenescope book. Everybody knows what that means in comics. So to some degree, is that also part of it? Because if at some point something's like, this is a stuffed rock book, meaning that, you know, I might not know Dylan Goss, or if there's another writer that you're working with, you know, I might not know their work, but I know at least the company's name. I'm like, hey, they do this in a certain style, and I might not remember your name because sometimes I'm bad with names, but that's also, I think, part of it, and it's very good for branding that concept.
Yeah, I definitely think that we have a certain style we use. Of course, all creators have a certain style they use. And if I'm going to do the writing, I'm going to do the writing in a certain style, whether it's Mara or if I do one of my future projects, I have a cyberpunk one in the queue, for instance. It's going to be very different, but that's going to shine through as something that I created. Of course, Rosie has her own art style, and artists can draw in different styles, but their own signature always shines through, right? So, yeah, absolutely, the company will have its own signature as well, just by virtue of the type of creators that will be under it. If I were to bring someone else on later, another writer, it would be a writer whose work I approve of, you know? So it would still not be necessarily in my exact style, but it would be a thing that resonates with me. So you would be able to tell, hey, this is a stuffed rock thing.
And now that we've gotten all that out of the way, we can go back to the fun stuff because I've actually read Mara. And my first reaction to it is very much reminding me of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra. And I could see, I could see the smile on your face because that had to be at least part inspiration to it. Um, before we get too far, this is your first comic. This is Stuff Rock's first comic. And what is the story about how this came about and what inspired it? Because it is such an interesting story. I've only read 2 chapters of it. I don't know everything, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think you're producing a physical book. And when that book comes, I'm going to probably buy it because I actually thoroughly enjoyed what I read.
So I take inspiration from a lot of different places for Mara, but there are definitely some big ones. You know, the wolf and girl trope. I've always been enamored with the wolf and girl trope ever since Princess Mononoke, right?
It's a good
I
one.
mean,
I love
that's
that.
it. I mean, it's hard to say that's a favorite trope of yours and not say it came from there, right? You might not be thinking about it while you were writing, but it was there. Um, the world itself is based partially on the Dungeons and Dragons setting of Dark Sun. Now, Dark Sun is a way worse world than Mara's world. Like it's terrible, it's awful. Mara's world isn't great, but it's livable. uh, but inspiration definitely came from there. Mara herself, you know, the driving factor behind her and the way she is with her powers actually came from Daphne Keene's performance in Logan. That first fight scene, she comes out and she's feral, she's on all fours. You know, that really struck a chord with me, and that rattled around my head. Yeah, that the
So
whole
even to talk about this, because this is so interesting, because obviously we all draw from inspiration when we
right.
create things and go into things. You know, I haven't written a comic yet. I am probably a long time away from doing that just because I got other things going on right now and I have other projects. This is a very time consuming project of mine. But, you know, obviously I have inspirations. You know, I draw from Joe Rogan and Howard Stern and Larry King as interviewers. And even other people who are just way better at this than I am. And to say that I don't draw from Larry King, Howard Stern, and Joe Rogan, I mean, that's clear, crystal cut. Um, but even that, I mean, because it is such an interesting book, what's going on, and just to dive a little bit more into the story, obviously Mara is an 8-year-old girl. She's pretty smart for an 8-year-old. She's pretty self-sufficient, still learning how to be more self-sufficient, but she can sort of fish and hunt a little bit. She could survive out on her own, and her parents love her. And well, I'm gonna give a slight spoiler: some raiders come and they kind of kill her family, and she's saved. And it's I mean, the book goes dark quickly, no question about it. I mean, you turn this book into a very happy scene into a very messed up scene very quickly, and I was not expecting it. I was expecting a little bit of a hardship, but not doing like a whole 180 here. So, what was that like? Because this book goes from 0 to 60 that quick.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think of when I create characters is what would spur a person like this into action. And that really depends what the action is, of course. But Mara's world really needs a hero, right? We haven't explored everything wrong with the world yet because there's just so much wrong with the world. Her tribe getting attacked is just a speck of dust in the wind compared to everything wrong with this world. So, thinking about it, okay, I'm a father. Would I allow my daughter to pick up an axe and go to war? Absolutely not, right? So, what would result in something like that? An awful tragedy. Absolutely an awful tragedy. There's no middle ground for, oh, maybe she could have trained and gone out on her own. No loving parents or even a close knit tribe would allow one of their members to do something like this, right?
Yeah, and it's also to even rewind it slightly, but also go forward. Her world, as you stated, she's in a very peaceful village that is not conflict free, and obviously she's in a village that sort of practices, I guess, a religion or believes in spirits and respects them. I'm not exactly sure the full extent of that relationship, if it's a religion or it's just a way of life, but it's this idea that there is still conflict in the world, and we see this very much where the world isn't miserable, but there are problems. And it's very much, I don't want to say a fend for yourself world, but you have to at least be slightly on guard. And so this is a big thing because that's a big factor where obviously, as I sort of alluded to and stated, her entire tribe gets wiped out from the start. I mean, I'm not ruining anything. You learn about it in the first chapter. So you're going to learn about this when you pick the book up, everybody. And so what was that even like? Because the world sort of sets the stage too and forces her growth in a lot of ways. And it's very interesting because this is a big playing field. This is a wide open world. And there's a million ways this can go. Again, I only read to chapter 2. So I'm not completely sure where it's all going. I'm going to continue to read. I want to make that crystal clear. But what was that like? Because there's a lot of room to play in.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I like child protagonists is that you can introduce the world through them. And if you think about it, you have an adult protagonist, they don't really have any reason to talk about something that's common knowledge for them, right? But she's got a lot to learn. And the reader also has a lot to learn because this is a totally different world than our own. Um, as far as her, becoming this spirit warrior, what Amato said was she's not the best of us, but she is the last of us. And the reason he brought that up, she's actually based, or her tribe rather, is actually based on the real world Inuit and Viking people. And you'll probably recognize that neither of those are warm weather people, right? And neither was her tribe initially. there was an ecological disaster before the comic begins because of a war between the gods that set the sky on fire permanently. So they used to have winter all the time. Now they have the only river in the area. Drastic change. They had to drop a lot of their traditions because they needed to survive. You know, survival is more important. And as they lost their traditions, they lost the spirit trial that would pick a new spirit warrior. Without that trial, the spirits didn't know who was the most worthy anymore until there was only one left.
And that it brings up a whole bunch of cool stuff that happens because obviously she's the last left. These spirits now, are saying we don't want to get involved and that we are not to get involved in human conflict. And well, she has a spirit who basically chooses her. And I don't want to say he possess. I think it's a he. I think he doesn't possess her, but he grants her powers. And it's this whole debate and philosophical debate between the spirits where they're like, we're not supposed to get involved. And then the other spirit says, well, if there's one of us left, at least we have a chance to build a new tribe to some degree. But if there's none of us left, and then it also becomes, are we going to make it into a child here who's 8 years old? And even that complicated thing. And that's not, a 8-year-old's conversation. That's a real adult conversation about making choices, saying, am I going to subject somebody to a messed up life because this tribe needs to be reborn and they're the last one? Can the 8-year-old understand what's about to happen? And what do we do next? And then sort of just doing it, this spirit. And now this 8-year-old can fend for herself, but she doesn't really know what the hell's going on to some degree. Very interesting, and a bunch of other stuff's happening too, but I'm very curious even about that because that's a complicated issue in this comic.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about the in the comic, that is, I wanted to talk about the debate of, quality of life versus being alive at all. You can't just say, well, Amaru just said, hey, if you're alive, it's better than not being alive. But it's really not that simple.
It's a very interesting discussion because it's the idea that, not to get, Pendulette said something on Bill Maher when about the 2016 election where, Bill Maher said, oh, we're choosing between one top evil and one lesser evil. And Pendulette said, but we're still choosing evil. And it's a very interesting discussion. I find this very similar because that's the choice that Amaru was sort of making, is that having no tribe is bad. And this, even if the Mara is still alive, but her life's messed up, it's pretty bad too. It's just maybe 3 degrees less bad, but it's still bad.
Yeah. What he was banking on was that it might destroy her mind if I go in, but it might not. And taking that gamble is better than just watching her die. And that was his thinking, whereas his colleague Angaku didn't see it that way. He said, "You do this, you're absolutely going to destroy her mind. Everything we know says you're going to destroy her mind." So, the gamble paid off, but Mara isn't okay. She struggles to talk. It did do damage to her, and she is going to struggle to recover. But she's still there. She still has a chance, and that's what he wanted. That's what Amaru wanted, was just for her to have a chance.
And it's also even more complicated because obviously Mara knows that her tribe is dead. I mean, it's not like she's unaware, even as an 8-year-old, and she's dealing with the fact that her parents saved her. And so obviously even going beyond just the comprehension level, it's the idea that she knows that her parents are dead. They saved her in a lot of ways. That the spirit saved her. She's the sole survivor of her tribe. and come to terms with it. And I don't think she fully understands that she's the sole survivor and what that means for a repopulation position. And I don't know how far you're going to go into the comic moving forward, but obviously that may or may not be an issue on this journey for the foreseeable future. You know, she's 8 years old. I want to make that crystal clear. But even just now, also understanding having Amaru's strength and even having Amaru's hate to some degree, and having a sense of revenge because, you know, clearly, I mean, she's now going to be in this world. She's going to now see the messed up stuff in this world. And, you know, I think it's safe to say that whether she wants to or not, a sense of revenge and a sense of justice is now in play too. And I'm throwing a lot of things at you, but I think it's very important that this isn't, you know, a cutesy little bootsy comic. This is a very mature comic, throwing it as an 8-year-old protagonist dealing with some messed up shit, for lack of a better word, you know, and then also the idea that you said she's losing her mind. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and it's kind of crazy that, and this all happens in chapter 1, by the way.
Yeah. You know, one of the I got people reviewing the first chapter, and one of the things that they said, you know, was that it left a lot of questions on the table. And I thought about that because, you know, you're not just, if you're disregarding what reviewers are saying, you're doing it wrong. Agree or disagree, you can't disregard it. You have to consider what people are saying.
I just to push back on that a little bit, I think sometimes you can disregard if you understand.
Yeah.
So I've had people look at certain things of mine, and then, you know, like I've had my mom and my friends look at panels that I used to do at anime cons, and then in panels, oh, this is a bad idea, and then by panel 4, they're like, oh, I get it now. So sometimes, you know, I've had that where I used to review comics, and I left a bad review for issue 1, and I'm like, oh man, I just read issue 2. I was off base, completely off base. And then I wound up saying, oh, that's why this made no sense in issue 1. And then in issue 2, you know, it's a problem. But then again, sometimes I've hit issue 1 perfectly. I'm like, this is a nightmare. Like Man-Eaters for me was a nightmare. I just couldn't write that. And then I read issue 2. I was like, yeah, this thing is exactly what I thought it was. So I agree to some point, but I get the point. That's my only pushback, is sometimes you need to leave questions, because that's how I felt at chapter 1, is I'm like, there's a lot of stuff I have questions about, and there's a lot of self-reflecting going on as well.
Yeah. I mean, I considered, you know, should I have left less questions on the table at the end of chapter 1? Because that seemed to be the main complaint, right? It's like, oh, we didn't get all our questions answered. And I thought about it more, and I said, no, this is going on for a while. I can answer questions in due time. You can't wrap everything in a bow in, you know, 24 pages or 23 pages. Sorry, you can't wrap everything in a bow, and I don't think you should try to. If you're doing one installment for 100 pages, maybe you should clear up some of those questions. But
even going further into that, you know, isn't that the point? I mean, you know, I've watched animes. You're an anime fan. You have the Fate poster behind you, and I think you got a few more next to you. And I'm a huge anime fan. And look, sometimes a show starts off with 15 questions. I'm like, what is going on here? And so sometimes I want those questions, because guess what? I want to be drawn into it. You know, some of my favorite books that I've ever read, I'm a huge Parker fan. If anybody has ever read a Parker novel, you understand what I'm talking about. Like, there's a lot of questions that happen in the first, like, 4 pages of that book. And that's my whole thing, is that, like, I want conflict, I want questions, and I don't want answers, but I want enough of something that's interesting. Like with your book in the first chapter, there's a lot of stuff saying, how is Mara going to deal with this? Let's not even talk about the revenge aspect. on a psychological level. And obviously, I read chapter 2, so I kind of know what happens. But and I'm going to be reading further. But it's the idea that how is she going to deal with this on a psychological level, and then how is she going to fend in the world, and what does this world really look like? Because we have a very narrow view, and I think that's where, if reviewers said I had a lot of questions, I think the real position on that is saying, look, we just opened up the can of worms here. And this is the first, like 18 pages. There's 50 questions that need to be answered, and we can answer any of them in any order. So I don't know if people had questions if it's truly a fair assessment. Because what do you want in your first issue, right? Like that's my problem. If it was issue 3 and we didn't have any implication of answers, then I think it's a fair discussion to say, yeah, there's too many questions.
Right. When I was doing research for this, I also did research into wolves. And one thing I found is that you don't want to be a lone wolf, you know? Edgy 14-year-olds think they want to be a lone wolf. Lone wolf is bad. They either join a new pack or die in very short order. And that's what Mara has to do. She needs a new pack, right? That's what we get into in chapter 2. And right away, I introduce even more questions at the start of chapter 2. Like they don't know how they got there, not really, and they have to figure out where they are and how to get out of there. And they're not in a nice place. They're in a worse place than Mara was, easily.
Yeah, and it's very, very interesting with what happens, and I'm purposely keeping it, not too exposed because, if I start talking about it, we're going to ruin stuff, we're going to ruin shock value, and, obviously, let's just say that things are not going well, and we're learning how messed up this world is, and it's very interesting, and how Mara may or may not be the solution to this new pack and this new tribe and this new entity, and her powers may or may not be important. They may not be sought after, and it's now, obviously what happened to Mara is very well could happen to this tribe too, and things are getting very interesting with that. So obviously it's so interesting with what's going on. And I don't want to dive too much further into the actual story because the other side of what is super cool about this, because I actually want people to read it. That's the thing. I actually want people to actually back you on Patreon. I want people to actually throw you money because producing content is expensive. People think this is free. This is not free.
No.
If I didn't have my sponsor, this is me doing this stuff for 8 years. I just started getting sponsors, and I'm reaching out to sponsors, and this is not free. Not by any stretch of the imagination. For almost 7.5 years, I was losing money, and I'm getting to the point where I am now not losing money, but I am not making money either. So obviously, I want people to read it on Webtoons and a variety of other places, but I also want people to back you on Patreon. And the reason why I say this is because you're producing this not on Kickstarter. You're producing this not on Indiegogo. You're not producing 24 pages, fulfilling it in, 6 weeks after, getting it out in 3 weeks, and then going back and doing another 24 pages and hoping it works. You're producing a page or 2 or 3 pages every Thursday.
Right. I thought about doing it the classic way with Kickstarter. It's classic now, I guess. It's fairly new to comics, but it's popular enough. And I decided that I thought it would be better if people were able to follow us every step of the way. For me, it's important to connect with readers. And it's harder to connect with readers if you just put up a Kickstarter every few months, right? And I don't know if it's important on a professional level, but for me personally, just to hear that people are enjoying it and to get feedback, good or bad, because if people aren't enjoying it, what's the point, right?
The way I feel about it is that obviously, I think it is important. I think there's been a shift. And all of my insights come out of different places. As a human being, and I promise it'll make sense in a second for everybody because I'm going to use something that's not comics. I sort of figured out what entertainment is doing through WWE and what they did with their talent. I figured out with cosplayers how there is a downward trend where companies are backing out of endorsement deals with the cosplayers who have over 1 million fans and moving to people who have 15,000. And the reason why is those 15,000, or even some of these people have like 9,000 followers. And the reason why is companies are saying, "Oh, their engagement rate is crap. Their engagement rate is bad." You know, Jessica Nigeria on cosplay, and I don't need to pick on her per se, but she has 4 million, followers on Instagram. She gets a 5% retention rate. That's not impressive. That's really not impressive. It's not good. It's actually really bad. If you're a company, if I'm hiring you and paying you a decent amount of money or giving you a sweet influencer deal for like 40 grand for you to put out my product, I need you to have like a 20% position. And so I think what's happening now is that places like Hot Topic are going with people who have less than 10,000 because they have a 15% engagement rate. They have less followers, but they have a higher engagement rate. And I think it's very important, actually. And I think comics and some of these creators aren't getting it right because I don't think they're understanding the idea that you don't need a lot of fans. You need fans who are loyal to you, that are willing to throw you $3 per every Thursday or $10 every month, and maybe you only need I'll make we could do math. So if you had 1,000 Patreons throwing you $15 a month, you would be set. You wouldn't be rich, but you could live a very good life on that every single month, where it would not be necessarily the easiest thing. But then, I mean, you're in Taiwan, so I don't know what the Taiwanese world and convention scene looks like. But if you were in the U.S. making 15,000 and then doing cons and then doing a physical book on top of that, you would be doing just fine because that is $180,000 minus expenses. So, I mean, my point that I'm trying to make is that I think it is very important to actually build up your tribe and build up connections. That's a long answer.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things Patreon tells you in their steps to be successful is to already have a huge following before you start Patreon. So be successful already and then start isn't the most useful information, you
I
know?
thought that's a wrong attitude because um, what they're basically trying to do is that's them saying, hey, we want to take a percentage out of you, and we want you to bring your 10,000 people over to us. That's what that means. I did not have 4,000 page likes when I first started. I'm very well aware of my Facebook page. I also understand how to build a brand, and that it's taken me 8 years to get here. I mean, but again, half of it is also just starting.
Yeah, I mean, we've been building pretty steadily, but we only started a year ago, pushing 800 on Twitter and about 750 on Facebook. But, you know, whenever we post something, there are people who are commenting and liking it. Like you said, it has higher engagement when there's a smaller fan base. But then you got to fight the algorithm too. You know, you can't expect your fans to go searching for your posts, right? So there's a bit of a balance to be made there, and I feel like the Patreon is better for that because obviously, if you're paying every month for something, you care about the content, right? And have one guy in particular who will comment on every single thing without fail within half an hour of posting it. I get an email and I already know what it's about. But you know, that's that's what I was hoping for when I started this, was to have a small loyal fan base who is, you know, invested.
Yeah, no. It's very interesting, and obviously, I'm retooling my fan base, and I push a lot of content out, and I really put my best foot forward. And it's not easy to grow a fan base, and it's very interesting with doing that, and it's a struggle. It really is. I mean, I'm gaining people like my page and things like that, but the engagement it's rough. And but I also understand that, I have a very different goal than other people in this, where this is a business to me. So I don't really care about the short term 400 people liking my post or seeing this interview. I care about me being in this space for the next 20 to 40 years. And I'm 28 right now, and I'm probably not going to leave podcasting ever. So I'm building out a huge library. So I don't really care if you're watching me now, because come 10 years from now, when I legitly have 1,500 interviews, and you're going to be like, oh my God, there's more content than anybody else on the planet here. And there's more interviews, and his interview skills and the amount that he's done. That's when I'm going to make my real money, is when I'm 38 and 40, because I'm going to have a huge library. I already have a big library. I'm going to be ending the year probably by December 20th. I want to say it's going to be my last interview for 2021. And at that point, I'm going to have over 400 interviews done in a very short amount of time, which is 8 years. And so I'm very different than other people, but I agree that, again, I just post in groups and people are slowly gravitating towards me. And then I'm going to be using Facebook ads, because Facebook ads, if you know what you're doing with them, they work.
Yeah.
They work efficiently. And again, you might have to go through 100,000 Facebook fans and essentially buy 100,000 and spend a decent amount of money to find 1,000. And you find another 1,000, and you find another 1,000, and you find out what they really like, and then you sell it to them. And that's the secret. It's nothing new. It's nothing new on this, but it is brutal. It is brutal, and anybody who says it's not is full of shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the worst part of content creation, is getting in front of people. We all heard the build it and they will come. Nope. Mm-mm. You got to push it to people.
Yeah, I agree. You have to push it to people, but I also believe in a great concept that you need to have a good product too. Because if your
Right.
product isn't good, you can push it as much as you want. Because the first few people are going to be like, oh, that's good, and I enjoy this. But if you're not consistent, I'm interviewing people every Tuesday and every Wednesday, 7 and 9 p.m., relatively around those times. Anybody who wants to watch it can watch it, and I don't get a lot of live viewers, but I push it in front of a lot of people on Facebook. I push it onto YouTube. I push it out into a bunch of other stuff. And a podcast is coming, mid-February, early March, maybe mid-March at the latest. And all my content's going onto this. I mean, I'm going into new territories all the time, because I understand that it needs to be pushed. And I'm willing to do it. It's so interesting. And I find it interesting because you're not doing traditional. And even going further, since you do publish every Thursday and you're writing this story out, and I don't know how far you are with scripting and all that stuff, but I would imagine that obviously this isn't, a weekly comic strip that doesn't have to do with anything the one before it, or you're doing like 6 pages and then you go on to a new story. It's more along the lines that this is a continuing story, but if you're producing, I don't know how many pages you publish a week.
It's one a week for now. I'd love to be able to do more, but it's a budget issue. That's where the Patreon comes in. hopefully it'll build and we'll get more patrons and we'll be able to do more, right?
So
But
to even talk about that, because I understand that you're probably scripted out for a while at this point, because it's just an art problem. It's not a writing problem, from my
right.
understanding. And so, but I also can imagine that if something massive happened in the world and that you wanted to say, oh man, I got a better idea how we could spin something, since you're doing it page by page, technically, I mean, new ideas can come up in chapter 3 or 4, or somebody could throw you an idea saying, hey, what if something happens with Mara with this? And you're like, oh man, that's a great idea. And that you have a lot of freedom to shift things because you're not blocked in like a Kickstarter. There's a lot more flexibility with doing something weekly or even bi-weekly or twice a week, for instance. And so what is that like? Because you have a lot of, control where you're going, and not to sound offensive, but you're almost going like 5% at a time per chapter versus doing the whole chapter and then kickstarting it, which is sort of, there's advantages to that too, but you're going piece by piece by piece with the story, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I mean the script for say chapter 2, which is what's being drawn at the moment, is already locked in. Of course, I mean I can't tell the illustrator, hey, I decided to do something different, so you can just toss your drawings. Thanks. But for future chapters, I have written like done and dusted chapter 8. So I could leave it as is. I like it as is. I might not like it as is in a month, right? So it can change. Certain things are locked in more than others, but the later ones that haven't started drawing yet, yeah, they can definitely change.
And then also things, you could speed things up, you could slow things down because you have so much control. 'Cause this is very hands-on. Because when you're doing
Right.
something weekly, it is beyond hands-on. Versus, when you're doing a Kickstarter, it's a different way to do something. And I also would imagine that it's a very cool process because you're going in such a slow method and that you're so consistent that everybody's getting to see it done in piecemeal. And that, it sounds weird, but it's a different reading experience as well. You're reading a page or 2 pages at a time, and then you have to wait the next week, and then you have to wait next week, and that you're actually seeing it come together, and that it's like an episode of anime dropping on a Wednesday, and you gotta wait till the next episode drops, and then you're getting that sense, and it's a different way to consume media, and it's very cool in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted on it because I do like how it's going, but on the other hand,
You
I
want to
want to
binge
be
it,
able.
don't you? You want
Yeah,
to be a binge writer. Just want to
I want to
treat
be
it.
a binge writer. I want to drop a chapter a month. Honestly, that's in my mind. That's what success would look like: is dropping a chapter a month. I'm not able to do that at the moment, but you know, working on it. We talked about building the audience. For every person who reads it, they're they're not all going to be paying for it. Of course, you can't expect everybody who sees your work to pay for it. That would be a wonderful dream world, but we're not living in that world, right? So it's on me to make it worth paying for. And if I successfully do that, who knows? We might get a chapter a month. Maybe it'll start next year. Make that the New Year's resolution. Start doing a chapter a month.
Well, I might have a proposition for you, but that's all fair. You're not the first person I'm pitching propositions to because I got something coming out and we're building out next year, February, March, and it's gonna make me very, very wealthy. Let's put it that way. And the only way I'm gonna get wealthy is by making other people just as wealthy, if not. They'll be slightly less wealthy than I will be, but that's not the point. They'll be wealthy enough that they'll be happy. You'll want to move to America. That's how wealthy you'll be. So hey, you know what it is? We buy semiconductors from Taiwan, so
Yeah.
I got nothing wrong with your country. Your country has done very well for me. but you have a drought problem, which I'm not happy about.
Yeah.
It's actually scary. It's very scary. But that's neither here nor there. So that's not what we're talking about. Um, but it's very interesting because I think that if you got a chapter out a month and you did it almost like a manga style, like a Full Metal Alchemist book or an Attack on Titan, I think that would change the way your book is read and the way your book is consumed. And I think more people would actually pay for it. And I think
Yeah.
more people would, jump at it. And I think more people would enjoy it. And honestly, I mean, I think that if you put the chapter a month on Patreon and then you just went to, releasing, 3 pages a week instead of that same chapter for free, and now it becomes an issue of, do you want it all now or do you want it, delayed, but then you're always ahead and you have content and then you're still keeping, but you're not ultimately punishing the free readers, but you're not giving them the benefit. But the people who want the chapter can then really read that all at once. And those are the binge readers. I think it would change.
Yeah, that is the catch, right? Because to get in early in the Patreon means you won't be getting as much, but if nobody gets in early, then that doesn't happen. Because we talked about content production isn't free, and I am paying out of pocket for all of the expenses, and I can only pay so much out of pocket. I would love to be able to just hire everybody full time, but
what you have is that it's not a paying out of pocket problem. You have a cash flow problem with this book, because if you didn't have a cash flow problem, where if you were bringing in $5,000 and your art costs $4,000, you wouldn't have that problem because you could keep paying out. If every time you spent $4, you brought in $5, or every time you spent $4, you brought in $4, you wouldn't have a problem, and you could just keep cycling. That doesn't mean you're going to get rich. That doesn't mean you can take money out of the business. That's a different problem. But from a production problem, there's only so much money coming in at certain points. And so as a result, that dictates the workflow. And that's what people don't understand about what I'm doing. I'm in a fortunate enough position that my StreamYard, I paid it all up front because I had sponsorship money. And then now I don't have that bill for 12 months. But that doesn't mean that when I buy another sponsor or that I have money in the bank in PayPal right now from Buy Me a Coffee, that is for a rainy day when I don't have sponsors for 6 months, because there could be a million reasons why that happens, or a sponsor drops me and then I got to go frantically cover something. And I don't have that problem as far as my show for another 12 months or another 11 months, but it could very well be that I don't get a sponsor for 6 months. Or that my sponsorship is $50 here, $50 here, $50 here, and that I don't have a $500, $700 sponsor. So that's what I think people don't understand about this, is that Patreon helps the cash flow in a lot of ways.
Right. I've had people on Twitter who will they'll retweet something, they'll quote it and say, hey, get this guy more patrons so I can read more comics. And I'm thinking, you can be one of those patrons, right? I mean, I understand that not everybody has money to spend on entertainment like that, right? I don't expect everybody to have extra cash that way. At the same time, I'm definitely limited by the cash flow as well.
So my issue with Patreon is that I would rather write you a check for $60 straight up when I have $60 if there's a $5 tier, and then not have to deal with it. So I wish that I could pay it all up front. That's why I don't like Patreon, because I don't like liabilities. To me, Patreon creates a liability problem for me. That's why I'm not a fan of it. I don't have a problem with subscription services. So when I buy Crunchyroll, I'm a Crunchyroll user, I'm a StreamYard user, I pay for all that stuff up front, because then I don't have a liability anymore for another 12 months. So it's treated like a bill. And that's where I think the hang up is. So if you were to say to me that I could pay for Patreon a $5 tier and give you my money up front, I would happily do it for content that I like.
So Patreon doesn't advertise this as well as they should, but you can absolutely do that.
See, I didn't know that because I've never like I'm the worst at this. See, this is the problem is that this is what I think people don't understand because I think this way and I think other people think it too, is that if all of a sudden I could just pay for it because I sometimes have money in weird times of the year, right? So sometimes like I have money in May. Every year for the last 5 years, I've had a surplus in May. I have a deficit in August. So if I can go buy and I bought a bunch of stuff in May that I know that I need for November, purposely, because I know I'm going to need that. And then November comes, I'm broke, but I have everything I need for November. It works beautifully because I understand how my cash flow works. So that's my problem with Patreon is that I didn't know that. And I've been
Yeah,
doing this for 8 years. That's a problem.
Patreon doesn't do well at promoting their content producers. It's not a discovery platform. You know, everything you want to share with the world, you have to share yourself, and they just give you the platform to upload that content and get subscribers, and that part works beautifully. I've never had a problem with uploading. I've never had a problem with posting. I've never had a problem with people being able to pay with their credit card or with PayPal. But like you were saying, you didn't know that you could pay for a year. I didn't know that you could do that until a couple months ago, but they've had this feature for a long time. So if I'm a content producer on that platform and I don't know what features you have, maybe you're not advertising it that well.
No, I mean seriously, like I've been doing this for 8 years, and obviously I'm more into Kickstarter. I know a lot less about Indiegogo, but I know more about Indiegogo than I know about Patreon. And I was tempted to start a Patreon, but I don't want to go content create. There's a reason why I'm taking a sponsorship route versus a Patreon route. I know people do Patreon, and my whole problem with Patreon is that I don't have time. And as a podcaster, what am I going to create on Patreon? I'm already pressed doing 4 interviews a week that require research. This would kill me if I'm to do a Patreon. I don't have the time or patience for it. To me, it makes no sense because it'll take away from the business, and the money that I could potentially bring in will just be a wash for my time. That's why me signing up sponsorship deals for 50 episodes is a better use of my time, and that takes me 8 hours, but I set it up every 3 or 4 months. It's a no-brainer for me. So obviously I didn't know that. That's a problem. If I don't know something like that, that changes the way I'm going to operate. Because again, I think I backed like one Patreon for 6 months, and then I got bored with it because I don't even read it, and I'll go and read it every, 3 months. I read all the content the person produced, and then I'm out. And I won't touch for 3 months, and it's not a lot of money. It's not like $5, and then after 6 months, I'm like, this isn't doing it for me. So that's what I mean. Where that's a big problem, I feel.
Yeah, they give you the content in your mailbox whenever it's released, but depending on what the content is, that might not be useful. It's great for the comic because you open your mail and the page is right there. You don't even have to go to the Patreon site. You can just read it right there if you want. And the same for the work in progress pages and everything else, your previews. It's all right there. So it works well for me. But I feel like if you do something different, it might not work so well for you.
I don't think it'll work really well for podcasting. And honestly, my whole thing is that I don't want to put things behind a paywall because I want as many viewers as possible to see it. And that's the problem is that, and I'm also doing live streams. It's not like these are private episodes where the private episode gets released on a Thursday and then the main episode, that same episode gets released on a Sunday, or the episode I am 20 episodes ahead in my entire schedule, and that all 20 episodes are available 20 weeks ahead of time. That's not how I want to run my business. And that's why Patreon is not a good platform for me. It also will require me to do a bunch of stuff. And I know that cosplayers use it. I know they use OnlyFans. I tried doing an OnlyFans. That's an interesting story. But again, I'm so content tuned up that I don't have time for this. And I am not a cam model, so that doesn't help either. The looks can be deceiving. I mean, this right here, you all glittered up. I'm just saying, I look fabulous. I'm just saying that I could pull it off. You should see what I can do.
I don't want to have Mara behind a paywall either. The Patreon is just for extra content, right? We have the free version online, and that has web optimized images, because the max quality image is 15 megabytes. You don't want to load that on a website, all right? That's a bit ridiculous, but if you're a fan of it, maybe you have a 4K screen, that big resolution page starts looking good to you, right? And then there's work in progress posts and lore posts that are on the Patreon. So it's really just early access and extra stuff. If you want to read the comic for free, you absolutely can.
Yeah, no. It's very important, I think, because obviously with comics, and I'm curious how you feel about this. I go back to wrestling, and I tend to do this in my interviews, but wrestling is not a large industry. By nature, wrestling is a $6 to $8 billion industry. That is not a big industry. Disney is just eats that up in minutes. Star Wars is worth more than wrestling as a whole company and as an industry. Wrestling is part of entertainment. So the idea where I'm going with this is comics is probably might be slightly bigger, might be slightly smaller. I'm not exactly sure. I would make the argument that comics is probably a little bit bigger than wrestling, but not by much. If you really tally everything that's up there, and so my point that I'm trying to get at is, if you put things behind a paywall in an already limited sector that already has a hard enough time, and indie comics do, you're gonna fail. And even for me with my podcast, if it was behind a paywall, it's gonna fail because I'm not big enough to be behind a paywall. And look at Joe Rogan on Spotify. His podcast isn't behind a paywall. It's free on Spotify. Okay? So you have the biggest podcaster exclusive on a podcast brand that's free, but it's not behind a paywall. So I think that should give inclination that for people who put webtoons behind a paywall, that's sort of broken in ways that aren't good. And because you want to build as much fan base, and I think the real play for you is saying, hey, look, here's a free comic, and then you need to merchandise it in a lot of ways. You need to say, hey, look, there's going to be a physical copy of this, and if you like the comic and you want to read it in a physical position, or in 4 years from now, chapter 1 is coming down, that's another position that, I've seen done where people say, look, in 10 years from now, chapter 1, or there's a countdown, and in 5 years, chapter 1's coming down, and then the next month, chapter 2's coming down, but you can buy the physical book for $10 for the first 5 chapters. I've seen that done, and that has been proven effective. So that's just how I view things, and I'm curious how you feel about that, because that's another way to monetize.
I'm sure it's effective, but my thing is that I just want to tell stories. I want to tell stories. I've always been a storyteller. I've been writing fantasy since I've been able to write. And, publishers didn't pick up my 200-word adventure that I wrote when my age was in single digits. But, I kept writing. And I feel like taking it down is against the spirit of that. What if you've never heard of Mara until 10 years afterwards, right? Then it's just not available anymore.
True, true. These are really interesting questions though, because as a content creator, I'm asking myself a bunch of questions. Should certain episodes of mine technically be behind a paywall? And, I'm even questioning that, should I lock certain episodes up? And should I say, hey, look, you know what is certain episodes are locked up? And that, if I start putting things up into a podcast format, which I'm going to, should certain episodes be on an expiration date on, for instance, Facebook, where and that doesn't mean it's not available on my podcast. It's just not available in certain platforms at that point. Should certain episodes, or should the live stream of this at some point, be taken down, and then you'll have the sort of edited, nice, clean cut of it, but you don't get the raw version where it's privatized. So the content is relatively still there, but certain aspects of it, but I'm talking like 5 years from now. But so you could get the content of it, but you're not going to be able to see the video per se, but you can only hear the audio. And these are really good questions as content creators, and also it's also refreshing, and especially when I'm going to be launching the podcast, it's a refresh position. So what happens then? And these are questions that unfortunately, and also gets complicated when somebody says, hey, can I buy your show? And that's when things get even more complicated, because that's something that I'm asking creators right now too, is that, would you sell your comic? If somebody offered me $500,000 for Conversations in Pop Culture and I had 300 episodes, I would definitely consider selling it, because at a certain point, there's real money now involved, and it's super complicated when real money comes into the playing field.
Yeah, I've been asked, if I would consider selling it if an offer was made, and I thought about it, but not very seriously, because this is what I would be doing if I didn't need a job. This is what I want to be doing. So if I get offered more money than I could reasonably make in my lifetime right now to give this up, well, then what am I going to do with myself?
So I'll ask you a question then. If somebody said, hey, look, I love Nara. I don't want to buy the comic, but can I option it for a anime film? That's a legitimate thing that you would consider.
I would 100% take a Netflix deal, or whoever wants to produce it. Netflix was just the first thing that popped into mind. But yeah, I would absolutely, do an anime.
Or even a live thing, I would imagine, or like if Pixar came knocking, because that's the other thing that I think is also very important right now. And I'm actually curious your thoughts on that as well, where I know a lot of people who are getting signed to places like Scout and Second Sight Publishing and a few other places. And I have a very, very cynical thought on that, where obviously right now Kickstarter is super hot. There are more projects on Kickstarter than should be. There's a bubble, no question about it, of indie comics. It's been brewing for the last 22 months, and at some point this thing's going to crash in on itself, because there are more projects, and what people are paying right now in the U.S., everybody just essentially got at least $5,000. Most people in America got a form of $5,000 to $10,000. And that ended maybe 2 months ago, technically. And so obviously people are running out of money, and things are not good. And while jobs seem to be back, jobs are also not back. I know this because I just went through not working for 22 months, and I know the exact sense of it. I am working now, in case anybody was concerned. This is why this Friday I'm going to be very ecstatic with my first paycheck. And it's already gone, by the way. That's not the point. I didn't say it was all spent. It's gone, not spent. It's gone. There's a difference between those two words. And once I get my CFA, we could talk about that. That's a different discussion. Um, CFA, for those who are interested, is a certified financial advisor, which means I can legally talk about these issues. So until then, I'm not going to comment on any of that. But how do you feel about where the indie comic market is going and what is going on with it? Because to me, it seems that everybody's getting signed, and there's a bunch of books that I don't think are that great that have gotten signed. And I think a bunch of companies are saying, let's just see what sticks. And they're throwing spaghetti at the wall, I feel.
This sort of thing has been going on for a long time. The earliest one I'm aware of, and I'm sure that if I knew my pop culture history more, I could go further back and see the same thing happening again and again. But the earliest example I can think of was in the 80s. Everybody was getting an album. People who should not have been singing were singing. You know, you could be like a Z-list celebrity and you would have an album out. And I saw the same thing happen again with SoundCloud rappers. You know, if you have if you have 1,000 or more followers, you were getting a record deal all of a sudden. And a lot of these people shouldn't have been getting a record deal, but they were just getting vacuumed up, right? And I think it's the same thing happening with comics now. You know, a lot of the people who are getting signed are maybe they shouldn't be, but I think the companies are just playing a numbers game. Some of the people who are getting signed are legitimately good, and they're willing to spend the money on the people who aren't to find the ones who are. From a business standpoint, it's great.
I mean, because the way I view it is that it is a shotgun approach, and there are going to be winners and losers, and it's the idea that I don't think the losers know they're losers, and I think the winners know they're winners. And if I know that by definition I am a loser, and my project's good, but it's not great, and that because a lot of what's going on is the way I see it, and this is what I'm very concerned about, because I am worried about the comic shop end of the business. Because if you go to a place like Second Sight Publishing, and then they bring up your book, or Behemoth, and then they go sell 3 issues to a comic shop, and those books don't move off the shelf. And those books then get reduced down from $4 to $3, then to $2. They end up in the dollar bin. And then after 3 issues, the shop's like, I don't want issue 4, and I'm not interested. Screw this, because I'm losing money. And while I only bought 20 copies, it was still $80, you know, or it was still $40. It took up shelf space, and I'm eating my lunch on this one, and then they don't come back for issue 4. Sales plummet, and then, well, that Behemoth goes back to the critic, says, book didn't do well, man. I'm sorry. Person did good on Kickstarter. They were happy. They made a little bit of money on it because Behemoth or Second Sight Publishing or Scout paid them, but now you're in a weird position where you just lost essentially a $20,000 deal. It hurt your book because it failed in stores. It hurt your name. And, you know, you also hurt a bunch of businesses. And while everybody's a big boy in the comic industry, at the same time, you know, comic shops might not buy into all this stuff, and that's assuming they order. And that's my biggest concern, because while I'm a comic book investor, and that's sort of a good position for me, because if I buy the right books and they take off like rockets and they have low print runs, I'm going to make a lot of money on the back end. And then if I take a shotgun approach and just copy who they're signing by one of each every book that they're signing from Kickstarter, and I know a bunch of them, statistically, one of those people is going to be great. Those shops might not be able to carry the loss. Or what's even worse is that the shops say, look, I'm not willing to take the gamble. I'm not an investor. I'm a comic shop. And that's the other thing. So that's what I'm very concerned about, because this type of stuff can sink a shop very quickly, and it could sink and destroy these pop-up companies. And I get flack for this. I've gotten attacked for things like this when I've outlined it. And I'm saying to myself, like, it could go one of two ways. And I don't think it's going to go the upside way. Because I think what you outlined is perfect because history has stated and shown us what happens.
Yeah, and I'm already seeing this happen with comic book journalists. They were doing a lot of indie comics a few years ago, and now they're not. You know, they're doing some indie coverage, but not as much as they used to. And now they're doing, the Marvel and the DC lists, and they stick to what works. And it is a double-edged sword that anybody can get into indie. And I see that a lot because I'm doing a web comic. Anybody can get into web comics, which means that unfortunately a lot of it isn't great. Does that mean that people should be barred from it? Absolutely not. But it does carry some disadvantages for people who aren't just doing it to experiment or as a hobby, right? To be taken seriously is a lot harder. And
Yeah, what I view is happening in comics. I don't know if you know the numbers. 90% of indie content creators will not recoup their money in comics. 90%. Why do you think I'm not in indie comics? I know I'm very good as a personal investor managing my finances, and I've done very well in the stock market. I've done very well as a comic book investor. You know, if I'm doing well and I'm successful in certain fields, and then there's a field where I have a 10% shot at recouping my money and then even lower making money, why would I go into that? And I understand the dream is you got to do comics and the glory and it's fun. But at the end of the day, glory and fun are great, but is losing money and to produce a comic worth that? And putting myself in a financially risk situation, is that worth it? And these are all complicated questions. And I don't think people understand that I have economic personal requirements so that when I am 65, me and my family will not be poor. And I will not have a monetary problem and that I will be able to live comfortably in my life. And that doesn't mean you can't produce comics and still do that, but it takes a lot more skill to do that. And it's a very rough field. And I think it's 3 to 5 years in comics that people don't stick around. People burn out and people say, look, I've spent 3 years to 5 years and I'm done in this sector. And that's why people disappear. And then you don't hear names and you're like, what did this person do for the last 20 years? Danny Shinyo is a good example of that. She did a few comic covers and now she does other art and she does some cool stuff. But she's done animation for a bunch of companies and done a lot of art, but she doesn't do comics because it's a rough field. There's a book I want to buy of hers, and I'm going to be buying it, over the holidays because it's an awesome book. But again, the book's expensive because she's done like 4 comic covers. So it's a complicated field, and this is what I think people don't understand about this.
right, if you're not willing to, be in it for the long run, and you're not willing to possibly lose money on it, you might be in the wrong field because it is a creative field and you should be passionate about it, right? I would love to make money on comics, but more than anything, I want to make comics.
No. I understand that completely, and I'm not here to discourage anybody, but I think people need to fully understand this. And this could come off preachy, and I'm not gonna tell anybody what to do, but I just give people a fair warning that, you know, sometimes in life you're in circumstances, if you just had a 1-year-old baby and you're like, I want to go produce comics, you got to go ask yourself a question: is this going to put my kid at risk? Because having children is expensive. If you want to produce comics, I'm 28, right now I'm not in a relationship, but the second I have a kid, that's going to come first. All that stuff is going to be coming first. The financial stability is always going to come first. And so I understand, I respect people who say, look, I'm going to go and do certain things. But like in the US, we have 401ks, we have IRAs. That's something that you also have to figure out saying, am I fully maxing out certain positions and taking care of things? And I think people need to know what they're getting into and the true sacrifices of creating content. Right now with my content, my costs are very low because it's just me and I handle everything. My costs from start to finish every year is about $900 for this project. It is not an expensive position, and with 3 or 4 sponsorships right now with my position, I can cover those costs. So I am not operating at a loss if I don't bill my time. If I bill my time, I'm operating in a negative position. And that's something that I think people need to fully understand, not to mention that there's problems brewing down the road.
Right, right. I mean, it is something that is budgeted for me, you know? Um, you can't spend infinite money. That's all there is to it, right? And could I produce the comic faster if I was incredibly financially irresponsible? Yes. Yes, I could come up with some more money if I tapped into my savings and put everything out there, and then I would have a comic out there and no savings and my fingers crossed. And I'm not willing to do that. You know, as much as I
Exactly.
want to produce the comic, there's only so far I'm willing to go.
And that's the thing is that, but isn't that a sense of responsibility because that's where you're at, and it's so interesting that this entire conversation and these are conversations that I feel aren't happening in indie comics, and I feel like nobody wants to talk about that. I mean, I see posts all the time saying, my daughter said, "Daddy, remember when we had a boat?" And then this comic creator was saying, "I remember back like 8 years ago or 6 years ago." We had more money. I could afford a boat. We lived in sort of a bigger house. I feel like I had more time. And then my question to this creator was saying, were you creating comics back then? He said, no, I started 5 years ago. And I said, that's the exact position because you're producing 4 comics a year and each of those books costs you $4,000. And while some of that's cash flowed, you're spending at least $9,000 to $10,000. And that's where your money is that and you recoup some of that money but you're having a $10,000 expense every year. And that's why you have less money. What if you just stop for a year? You're like, oh my God, I got a raise. But you didn't get a raise. Instead, what you did is that's the problem. And I get it. You got to scratch the itch. I get it. I'm not discouraging anybody, but understanding, see, my money is my bitch. I am not a bitch to my money is a good way to put it. And once people understand what that means, it's very different. I am in control of my money. My money's not in control of me.
Right, right. And I mean, if you look at some of the bigger names like Jim Zub is someone that he's a great guy. He has produced a lot of information that's helpful for writers, and if you message him on Twitter, he will absolutely respond and help you out, right? And he doesn't only write comics. He writes for Avengers, and that's still not the only thing he does.
Chuck Dixon doesn't just write comics. He writes novels. He's written for other things. He's done big books, and he also commands a lot of money. You look at people like, also you have people who are executives in companies who then write. And, they're doing other things. I mean, I had Paul Levitz on. When he was an executive in DC, he used to write on the weekends when he wanted to write a column for extra money, but he was doing executive things during the week, and so that's the thing that people do. Look at Scott Snyder. He has a comic class. I don't know if Scott, and I don't know Scott, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I don't know if Scott is teaching the comic class on Substack because he wants more comic writers, or if he says, look, this is a real opportunity that people want to learn from me and that I can make an extra 8 grand every single month. And while I'm basically taking a speculative bet on my comics and we're making a certain income, the money's hot. If I could use an extra $100,000 to $150,000 combined with cons and combined with other things, we can make money, and maybe this is going to last for 5 years, and I could pull in, $1 million in the next 5 years, so that when there's rougher times, I am building a business subsequently off of this, beyond this, Pop Anime Comics, the company, and it's going to be rebranded into a holding company, and that's where we're going. I mean, I'm a big company. I am my website. I am the Pop Anime Comics Lounge podcast. I am Conversations in Pop Culture. I'm building out a comic book investing panel / class. That's going to be like 22 plus hours. I'm building out another project that I don't want to talk about publicly. So I have a t-shirt company built into this on Redbubble that's extremely passive. So and then I have my eBay comic business. Like, I'm not relying on one position. I think that's what people have to understand, that people who produce comics, comics are just one area you can make your money in. And a lot of these people who do it don't just do comics, because comics doesn't pay well, and it's also temp work. Being a stripper in a high-end club and being a comic writer are the exact same principles, where it's temporary. It is not permanent. And I know that's going to be sounding offensive, but when people understand it, they're like, oh, I get it.
Right. And really, it comes down to how you want to participate in the industry, right? Are you going all in the industry, or is this a side gig for you? If it's a side gig for you, are you in it to make money, or are you in it to put your work out there? I'm in it to put my work out there. I want more cash flow, not because I want to get rich off comics, but because I want to do more comics, right? That's what's important to me. And if you're in it to make money, you might be in it for the wrong reasons. Because, yeah, people make money off of comics, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, there's nothing wrong with treating it like a business. But people are in this for cash grabs because they see it's hot and they want to do things. And you can tell when a book is a cash grab and when it's not. I know immediately when a book is a cash grab. And I know somebody in particular who's very close to my family who did a cash grab book. And let's just be realistically stating the book didn't go anywhere. The book was published. It did not catch. And it was a failure for a reason. So there you go on that front. So obviously that's something that's super interesting. But that kind of really answers my question about sustainability, because it's such a hot topic right now. And it's like my favorite thing to talk about. But I do want to back out of that. And I am curious, because you are in Taiwan. And I respect your country, unlike John Cena, but that's a different discussion. It's okay. He has excellent Mandarin when he apologizes. I'm not happy with him on that, and I am a John Cena fan. He was not America first that day, I could tell you that. He was China first that day. And luckily, Facebook is an American company, so I could say that without getting into trouble right now until Tencent buys Facebook, but that's neither here nor there. But Tencent's a Taiwanese company, oddly enough, so we're safe. See, it's fun when people speak freely. I can't be canceled, so it's all right. But what is COVID like in your country? Because in the U.S., it is complicated. We are a mixed bag of things, for lack of a better word. And I'm curious what it is like in Taiwan, because I am unfamiliar with how COVID has affected your country.
COVID was taken very seriously starting from December 2019. As soon as that chat leak happened, and China came out and said, oh, it's really not that big a deal. Taiwan said, "Oh, China says it's not a big deal, then it is a big deal." There was immediately a mask shortage. Um, the government instituted a temporary mask rationing. You could only buy 3 masks a week, and it was tied to your insurance card. Um, and you could pre-order it, or you could get in line when stores started selling them, and they would have the schedules up. It was a big deal until they could get more factories producing enough masks. But people would already wear masks here just as a normal thing going out. Not everybody did it, of course, but it would not be uncommon to see somebody wearing a mask going out. It's just they just considered it uh, for their own protection, and nobody questioned it. As part of the culture. So when it came to be that everybody had to wear masks, it was very, very easy. There wasn't a lot of pushback on that because for a lot of people, it was just, oh, so nothing changed, you know. Uh, so we never had a whole lot of cases. There was one point in time where there were more cases in the White House than all of Taiwan.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, yeah, and the last outbreak was what the U.S. would call nothing, honestly, but it resulted in huge lockdowns. What happened was a pilot broke quarantine, and there was a nearby brothel, and it kind of got out of hand from there. But to us, out of
So he was
hand,
having a good time.
he was having a good time. Yeah,
He was
but
he was in the Mile High Club for sure.
oh yeah, but for us, out of hand is 12 cases.
So what was the government punishment for him? Is like he have to only fly at like 5,000 miles now instead of 30,000? Like
Uh, he um, he lost the ability to uh, stay in Taiwan. Yeah. So like if he's flying a plane and it lands in Taiwan, he stays on the plane now.
so what was he a Taiwan citizen?
No,
Taiwanese?
no, no.
Because if he was a citizen, that would have been, I think, very draconian.
Yeah, that would have it would have been something special to make him stateless, but no, it wasn't quite that bad. Um, but yeah, I mean, the huge outbreaks that result in restaurants getting shut down, for us, that's a handful of cases, right? We haven't had a new case in a while. Actually, I think it's been at least a week since we've had a new case. But we're still going with masks whenever we go outside. Uh, Indoor dining is allowed now. Um, you can take off your mask to eat, of course, but
You have to
they
eat through
do.
the mask, and some people are not ready for it.
Well,
It's
they
very
have.
hard to eat your frappuccino through a mask.
Well, I learned to just put the straw under the mask, honestly. But they they don't just have free for alls in restaurants. They have social distancing. In places like food courts where people are by necessity close together, they have plexiglass barriers on the tables, right? So it's been taken very, very seriously. Unfortunately, we have a shortage of vaccines. Now, I'm 34, which makes me a pretty low priority to get vaccinated. I work at home, another low priority to get vaccinated. I don't have any health problems. Again, low priority. Um, so I don't even know when I'll be able to get a vaccine.
So to even talk further into this, because obviously COVID is a global problem. It is not a Taiwanese problem. It is not a China problem. It is not a U.S. problem. It is a global problem. And the U.S., I would imagine Taiwan to some degree, China, the UK, France, Germany, those are, Canada, those are all relatively countries, Mexico as well to some degree, are going to be fine. And a variety of other countries are going to figure it out. Australia and New Zealand, that's a mess. Um, that's a mess. I don't want to touch it. You cannot ship to those countries right now. God forbid fly into those countries. If you have to fly into Australia, God help you. Um, it's actually a way to do it, but it's called a parachute, and you won't be able to leave. But anyhow, um, the idea is that because the real problem, I think, for all these countries is how do you engage in global trade? And obviously, you're not at the stage of shipping out books. You have that advantage at this point. But if I'm backing a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo that's coming from Taiwan and I'm willing to pay the shipping, that's a very difficult problem to have right now. And I'm an eBay seller and I don't sell internationally because I don't want these problems. And COVID has further confirmed that it's not probably the easiest thing, and there's a variety of things going on. So where do you think the future of comics are going? Because at this stage in the game, it is global. It's not local anymore. The local market is the global market. And so I'm curious how you feel about that, because I don't know if it directly pertains to you, because everything you're doing is really digital at the moment. Doesn't mean you're not going to go physical, because I think you're coming physical sooner rather than later. But what does that mean, and what do you think it's going to affect, people shipping things around the world?
I also back comic Kickstarters and Indiegogos, and I have seen shipping delays. And it's hard to imagine that those delays are going away anytime soon. You know,
Years.
yeah,
Just
I
to give you an
see.
idea, I don't know how many comics you pick up, but Image has announced they're not doing second print runs on certain books. And it's just like, what? And so I'm not a huge Image fan per se, and I moved into other entities on comics because I just think there's better deals elsewhere that nobody's looking at. Um, December 7th is going to be a good day for people who are understanding what's coming out. But even still, it's the idea that when Image said we're not doing second prints on books and shortages and books not getting on shelves, and I've had this conversation like 2 weeks ago where I said I'm concerned about comic shops because if you say a book's going to be there and it's in my pull list, or I come to your store expecting to pick it up and it's not there, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to yell at the store clerk, for instance, but I'm not going to be a happy camper, and I might buy less, and I might take out my aggression through my wallet. Meaning that if I was going to buy $20 of books, I might only buy five, or I might leave the store empty-handed, because I've done that when things are not when they're supposed to be there and they're not. So
Well, take Kickstarter for instance, because of course Kickstarter is going to be very popular going forward. It doesn't feel good to back a Kickstarter when you're still waiting to receive something, right? Now,
oh, I
some
know, I
people
know.
some people will back a whole bunch of them and just not even remember. I have a friend who backs so many Kickstarters that he just gets mystery packages every month, and good for him. But I'm not that guy. Uh,
So let me tell a story. Here's the story: is that somebody was supposed to ship out a book, and it's a trilogy. So they got book one to me, great. Book two was supposed to get to me, like I think in August. Book two hasn't even been shipped out yet, but they ran a Kickstarter for book three. And I'm saying to myself, like, I'm now in a real tough position as a fan because I don't want to back this project. Spent like $90 on book two to buy all the extras. I'm waiting, and now you want me to spend another 25 for book three? And I would have spent another $90 on book three, but since I didn't get book two yet, I don't want to spend the money on book three. And I want an interview with this person who's been on my show a few times, and I want to talk about this, and I want to call out bullshit. And I want to say, dude, like you lost about $70 with me, because you didn't get me book 2 and I couldn't read book 2, and then I backed book 3 because it's the trilogy, but you put me in an awkward situation and I'm not the only one. And that was a mistake. And while you did better than the other two, you probably gave up 10 to 15 grand. Easy. Because you lost $75 with me or so. And you also lost me moving forward as a customer. I feel my trust is violated. And I want a conversation with this guy. And I want to be very upfront. And it's going to be an unpleasant thing. And I think he needs to know it. I think he needs to hear it. There's a book that I backed. I backed it in September. They legitimately shipped out my book today. You want to talk about it? That's the fastest turnaround time. I am going to get that book in 10 days or less. And I'm like, what? How? And those people have my money now. They have the money from the other guy who I was forced into. So there's been an even exchange. And that's a problem with shipping delays. I don't know how these people pulled this off, but they did something right. They would have got me my book 3 weeks ago if there wasn't a printing delay.
Oh yeah, I mean, I also back board games because I paint miniatures. You know, that's a big thing for me. So when I see a board game with cool miniatures, I want to back it, and I'm waiting on one, and the company is doing another Kickstarter, and as cool as it looks,
It wouldn't be one of the people that I really like. It wouldn't be Santine Phoenix's project, would it?
no, no.
I love her. I know her very well. So if you're gonna talk bad about her, I'm gonna let you know I'm not gonna end the video. So
No, but I mean, I honestly, this has happened with a couple of different companies, right? Like and they're small companies, and I understand that they're in a stage of production where it makes sense for them business wise to make another Kickstarter, but it doesn't make sense for me as a customer to do this, you know? And
and then you have to make a choice. That's not a fun choice
yeah,
because it's a little bit different though because the board games don't stack up. With a
right.
comic, when comics stack up, because now if I don't back that third book, I'm going to miss out on the trilogy. So I'm forced to back it. And then I'm really pissed about it. And I don't give a fuck if you have a printing shortage. You're not having a printing shortage. You are 3 months behind, you know? And I just spent $90 of my hard earned money. And I haven't gotten book 2 yet. And I could tell you for a fact that if book 2 and my nice hollow foil book comes damaged, you're damn right I'm going to raise some hell. And I'm going to go hard. And I'm going to get a lot of attention. And I'm going to throw real Facebook advertising money into it. I will run a $50 campaign because I will be furious. And then I will get attention. And there will be quelling of anger. There will be quelling of anger to come. And I got no problem. So that guy, if he sees this, better pray my book arrives perfectly. He better pray because I'm already angry enough about the problem, and I've lost trust. That's the issue here. See, if I know every Thursday you put out a chapter, and let's say you say, hey guys, I'm taking 2 weeks off, it's Christmas. That's fine. That's not a violation of trust. What's a violation is that you don't show up for the next 3 months every Thursday. And I'm going to be there every Thursday. See, so it's Wednesday. Tomorrow, you're going to be releasing a new page, right? If your page is there tomorrow, there's trust built. When trust is violated, that's what kills me. And so this guy, I like his art. I like the artists he hires. I know a bunch of them. I want to interview a bunch of his artists. And I've interviewed a few of them. And now what's going to happen is that you've lost trust with me. You know, Zenescope has never, ever violated my trust as a company. And it's not Zenescope. So that's the problem with the entire comic world is that when trust is violated, my money leaves.
You know, and delays do absolutely happen on our end too. But the reason that readers never see that is because we have a buffer. And I established this very early on. If I'm not You know, if I don't have pages in advance, there's going to be a problem. What if one of us gets sick? You know, what if there's a holiday? Chinese New Year is a big deal, you know? Well, it is here. It's probably not a big deal in the U.S., but here it's a big deal. It is literally the biggest holiday here, you know? And people travel. I can't expect Rosie to be drawing during that time. But
I don't think anybody minds that as much as, you know, when you say, hey, book two's 3 months late and I'm doing book three at Kickstarter, that's when trust becomes an issue because I haven't gotten book two yet. And book two just got at the printer in the middle of your funding of book three. So book three as a campaign is going to be fully funded, and then you're going to get book two back.
yeah, and you know, with printing delays, I understand and I don't. For instance, there's one I backed, and this is a guy I worked with. You know, this is a team I worked with. I did a crossover with Mara and this comic, Glyn and Monsterland. You know, the crossover was great, lots of fun. It was definitely not as dark as Mara's typical fare. You know, it was just a non-canon, funny little thing we did. And I also backed that comic because I liked it. You know, and he was on Indiegogo and he was giving updates constantly. It's like, oh, yeah, I want to get everybody their comic by Halloween. That was the original goal. He's like, and later he says, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't do it. You know, there's been printing delays. Well, his printing delay was I got it in Taiwan on November 6th from Halloween. So these 3 month delays, I don't really, you know, I don't really feel empathy towards a 3 month delay when a first time creator can have a delay and get it out a week later.
So my issue is that the book was supposed to be in my position in August. The guy, I think, just got book two in today, or he's going to get it in a week. That's the problem. But you launched book three, which is predicated on book two. That's where it gets tricky. Maybe you should have said, look, it's good for business for me to do X. It's not good. It's good monetarily. It's bad for business because you lost me as a customer. I'm a high spending customer who is a Zenescope fan. So if you can take my money away from Zenescope, congratulations, you did something that is very different because I am your client that, you know, you're taking market share away from your competitor. And you now have forced me to go back to my your competitor. That's not good business. That's actually horrific business. That's really, that's the worst thing you can do. The worst thing you can do is never, I forget what Chris Voss says, but never do something to somebody that can hurt you. And you know what it is? That's how I view things. I don't do things to people who I know who can hurt me. I don't say things to people who I know can hurt me. You know, I'm smart because that's the worst thing I can do. It's not anything beyond that. Now, certain people I know can't hurt me. So I can say whatever I want to them, but I know who can hurt me, and I avoid them like the plague. And I don't say anything to them nor do anything to them.
So Mike Tyson had a less elegant way of saying it, but it was pretty much the same thing. He said the problem is people don't get punched in the mouth anymore. You know,
that too. I agree. I absolutely agree. So obviously we've been speaking for a while, and we spoke about a lot of things apparently. And this is how my interviews go now. Is that you never know what we're going to speak about, and if everybody actually watches the interview to the end, hopefully they will become smarter. Hopefully. I don't know though. And I didn't get kicked off Facebook because I used an hourly link. So please click the hourly link because it actually works. And Facebook doesn't like Patreon links or Kickstarter links or Indiegogo links apparently. So go figure that out. You know, I don't know why. Beats me. But I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself because you got a lot of stuff going on. And obviously I want people to read your comic. So where can people find Mara Where can people find Stuff Rock Studios? Where can people support the Patreon? Where can people support you? Where can people check out Facebook pages, Instagram pages, Twitter, as if I don't already say it, TikTok if you got it. And also, I don't know if you have an email list, but if you do, where can people sign up for one if you got it?
You can check out the comic for free at mara-comic.com. There's a newsletter sign up right there if you want to get reminded when there's a new page. Our Facebook is facebook.com/StuffRockStudio. Twitter is @StuffRock. Our Patreon is patreon.com/StuffRock. We don't have a TikTok.
It's all right. It's all right. In due time. In due time. That's all I'm going to say. In due time, we all come to TikTok. It's just the way the world goes. Everything flows to TikTok. But having said that, all jokes aside, you have to support indie content creation and indie comics. And what that means is you actually have to back and pledge on Patreon. And you can do that monthly. You could do that yearly. I think there's a few other options. I'm not sure, but you have to support monetarily. It is super important because, again, content production is expensive, and definitely supporting on an economic level, helps to get this stuff done. And the more money that is thrown at projects, the more that they can be created. But let's say you're in a tough position with money, please actually read the book. Stay in touch with the book. Read it because creators want their things to be read. It is very important that projects are read, and then share that you're actually reading it out there, and share the Patreon link, and share where it can be read, because that does ultimately enrich the creator directly and indirectly. And people want their things to be read, and if enough people read it, it's going to be like, I want the extras, I want it early, and I want to support where it's going. Furthermore, sharing it in Facebook groups and things like that also is very helpful. And also shoot messages to creators and say, hey, I really liked your book. I like this page. Oh, man, thank you for putting this out every Thursday. I know that it's not easy to do it. Or if you're like me and you're looking for guests, obviously reach out to interview a creator, because it goes a long way. I mean, I'm going to be introducing you to a bunch of people in the next, 2 weeks. And who knows, a few of them might read Mara, or a bunch of them might read it and be like, oh, man, this is really cool. This is an awesome project. And then they're going to follow you, and then they're going to jump into your social media. And then they might check out your Twitter, your Facebook pages, your Instagram pages. And that's another way to support as well, because the bigger your social media, obviously, the more you can push out. So all that stuff matters, and doing all of it counts. All of it counts, and all of it is a necessity, because it is not enough just to back something on a money level. All that stuff needs to happen. Furthermore, with me, I am an indie content creator too, so I understand and I get it completely. So I really appreciate everybody who shares this video out, likes this video, engages with it, comments on it, and actually puts real comments and doesn't cross certain lines with me. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the engagement. I view interviews as very sacred, so if I don't get to your comment, I'm going to get to it after I'm done interviewing, and we have a facilitation, but obviously it's between me and the guest, my interviews. Furthermore, I do have Buy Me a Coffee, so that is sort of like Patreon, where you can donate money to me. You can buy me 1, 5, or 50 coffees, and I appreciate that support, because all the money goes into the show. And if you have a live read, I'm more than happy to promote your project on here. If you would like to use Buy Me a Coffee, you could pick that perk up. So obviously that is very helpful to me, and that's what helps keep this show active. I am also launching a Kickstarter on January 1st, ideally, if I get approved, 12:01 at night, New Year's, first minute. I don't know if anybody else is going to be launching it, but I would like that title. And if I am the first person, I will be christening a belt. If I get fully funded and we reach a certain goal, it will be a stretch goal, and it will be the New Year's Championship belt. So that is what I'm planning to do. It will be awesome. It will be like a John Cena spinner belt, and it will be supporting Taiwan collectively, unlike Mr. Cena with Fast and Furious. I would just like to say Taiwan is a real country. It is not a country, and anybody who says it is, like Mr. John Cena did, in perfect Mandarin, might I add. So you got to give him respect there. You got to give him respect there. Just because he needs an attitude adjustment does not mean that on that point that he does not. We should not criticize a man for doing it in perfect Mandarin, because that is difficult. So on that note, before I get in trouble from WWE or they write a cease and desist to me and you, I'm going to stop right there. And yes, that's what's going on with me. So please support me and support Dylan and actually read Mara. And after you read Mara, just give Dylan your credit card on Patreon, and he'll take what he needs to make this project work. So having said all that, I'm going to give you the final word because my throat is killing me.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here. And, I appreciate everybody who reads it, whether or not they're a backer, because that's what's important to me is, getting a comic out there and having people enjoy it.
Yes, that is exactly what I want everybody to do, is go read it and actually tell Dylan what you think of it, because that'll go a long way. So on that note, I believe that is a wrap.